Right now, oil prices are pretty flat, but that could change quickly if Iran decides to shut down the Strait of Hormuz.
Though it has many enemies in the region, thanks in part to its own adversarial stance and nationalistic pride, Iran, unlike Israel, Pakistan, or India, has famously exercised restraint in crossing the nuclear threshold. Experts believe that they have the technical expertise and enriched uranium stockpiles that place it within weeks of weaponization. But for decades, Iran has never crossed that red line. Part of the reason is that Tehran has a secret weapon up its sleeve that's even more powerful than a nuke. The country has leaned heavily on asymmetric tools of power projection, with the Strait of Hormuz, a vital trade artery, standing out as the cornerstone of its deterrent strategy. The recent 12-day war between Iran and Israel has cast fresh light on how Tehran may recalibrate its doctrine moving forward, and why the Strait of Hormuz is a ticking time bomb and no one's ready for when it goes off. Let's take a deep dive into this potential global trade choke point. The Strait of Hormuz. Situated between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most strategically significant maritime choke points. Geographically, the strait spans approximately 33 kilometers at its narrowest point, with shipping lanes only about 3 kilometers wide in each direction, separated by a 2-kilometer buffer zone. This narrow passage is flanked to the north by Iran's coastline and to the south by Oman, giving both nations a territorial stake in monitoring or controlling maritime traffic. Despite its modest width, the Strait of Hormuz serves as the main artery for the flow of Persian Gulf oil to global markets.
The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow stretch of water that links the Persian Gulf to the rest of the world, about a fifth of the world's oil.
And any disruption here can have immediate and far-reaching implications for global economic stability. The US Energy Information Administration estimates that nearly 17.3 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum liquids pass through the Strait of Hormuz daily, representing around 20% of the world's total oil consumption. Essentially, this is the route that's keeping the global economy flowing. Now imagine if it were to be abruptly shut down. Iran can indeed do that. The consequences would be catastrophic, so much so that the entire world order might be jeopardized. This is no hyperbole, just stick around and you'll see just how real this threat is. 17.3 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum liquids is an enormous amount. This volume includes exports from the oil-rich monarchies of the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Qatar, as well as from Iraq and Iran itself. Saudi Arabia, in particular, is the largest single user of the route, shipping roughly 6.2 million barrels per day through Hormuz. Iraq follows with around 3.3 million barrels daily, while the UAE and Kuwait contribute approximately 2.7 million barrels combined. Qatar, though a relatively minor oil exporter, relies on the strait for the shipment of liquefied natural gas, or LNG, making it the world's leading LNG exporter via this route. Iran itself is both a user and potential disruptor of this passage. Although sanctions have severely limited its exports in recent years, Iran still ships over 1 million barrels per day, primarily to China and a few other buyers willing to navigate the risks. Crucially, Iran's proximity to the northern coast of the strait gives it an unparalleled vantage point, with several naval bases and military outposts along the coastline, including the strategically located port of Bandar Abbas. Moreover, Iran maintains military control over key islands such as Abu Musa and the Greater and Lesser Tumbs, territories disputed with the UAE, which gives it further leverage in managing access to and from the strait. Given the sheer volume of oil transiting through the Strait of Hormuz, the global economy is acutely sensitive to any signs of instability in the region. Oil prices have historically responded with volatility to incidents in or near the strait. For instance, in June and July of 2019, a series of tanker attacks attributed to Iran or its proxies, such as the attacks on the Norwegian-owned Front Altair,
oil tankers attacked in the Gulf of Oman. This comes amid rising tensions with Iran.
And the Japanese-owned Kokuka Courageous, caused Brent crude prices to spike briefly by nearly 5%, and raised shipping insurance rates for the region sixfold. During the same period, the US established a maritime security initiative dubbed Operation Sentinel to provide naval escorts for commercial vessels through the strait. This should highlight the critical importance Western powers attach to the uninterrupted flow of energy through this corridor. The economic ripple effects of any obstruction in the strait go well beyond oil prices. Disruption inflates global shipping insurance premiums, raises costs for energy importing nations, particularly in Asia, where Japan, South Korea, and India are heavily reliant on Gulf oil, and can stoke inflationary pressures worldwide. For example, when tensions escalated in early 2020 after the US assassination of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad, oil prices briefly surged by more than $3 per barrel. Even without actual closures, Iran's ability to threaten disruption has a psychological and financial impact on global markets. Alternative export routes exist, but are limited in capacity. The UAE has constructed the Habshan-Fujairah pipeline, which allows it to bypass the strait by routing oil to the Arabian seaport of Fujairah, but its capacity is only about 1.5 million barrels per day, far less than the UAE's total export volume. Saudi Arabia also operates the East-West Pipeline, or Petroline, capable of transporting up to 5 million barrels daily from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea port of Yanbu. However, even combined, these alternatives cannot offset a prolonged closure of the strait. Iran's geostrategic position and military control. Iran's geographic positioning on the northern shoreline of the Strait of Hormuz gives it unmatched strategic leverage in one of the world's most vital maritime corridors. Iran controls not just the coastal territory along this northern rim, but also maintains a military presence on key islands within the strait, most notably Abu Musa, Greater Tumb, and Lesser Tumb. These islands have been under Iranian control since 1971, following the withdrawal of British colonial forces. This allows Iran to dominate maritime traffic lanes, giving it line of sight and missile reach over nearly every vessel that passes through the strait. Iran has systematically fortified this strategic advantage through extensive militarization of the coastline and islands. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, especially its naval division, known as the IRGC Navy, or IRGCN, plays a central role in this effort, operating independently of Iran's regular navy. Major naval bases have been developed in Bandar Abbas, Iran's principal port on the strait, as well as in smaller installations at Jask, Keshem Island, and Abu Musa. These bases host a growing fleet of small, fast attack craft, as well as launch sites for cruise missiles and drones. The IRGC has also deployed coastal defense missile batteries, equipped with systems such as the Noor, which is an Iranian version of the Chinese C-802, and the more advanced Garda and Qader cruise missiles, all capable of targeting ships within a range of up to 300 kilometers. One of the defining features of Iran's military strategy in this region is its reliance on asymmetric naval warfare. Unlike conventional navies that emphasize large warships and open sea battles, the IRGCN prioritizes agility, saturation, and attrition. Their fleet consists of hundreds of small, fast-moving boats equipped with rockets, heavy machine guns, and sometimes even torpedoes. These vessels are capable of swarming enemy ships, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Additionally, Iran possesses Kilo-class submarines acquired from Russia, and it has developed its own classes of smaller subs, such as the Ghadir, specifically designed for shallow water operations. Iran's arsenal also includes an extensive inventory of sea mines, which were used to devastating effect during the tanker war phase of the Iran-Iraq conflict in the 1980s. In 1987 and 1988, Iranian naval forces mined international shipping lanes, leading to several incidents, including the mining of the US-flagged tanker Bridgeton, which struck a mine off the coast of Farsi Island. These incidents prompted the United States to launch Operation Earnest Will and later Operation Praying Mantis, one of the largest US naval engagements since the Second World War. The US Navy retaliated by sinking or damaging several Iranian vessels, including the frigate Sahand. More recently, in 2019 and 2020, Iran again demonstrated its capability and willingness to disrupt maritime shipping through the strait. Between May and June 2019, 6 oil tankers from various nations were damaged in the Gulf of Oman under suspicious circumstances involving limpet mines and explosive charges. The US and its allies blamed Iran, a charge Tehran denied. In July 2019, the IRGC seized the British-flagged tanker Stena Impero in retaliation for the UK's earlier detention of an Iranian vessel, Grace 1, near Gibraltar. The Stena Impero was held for over 2 months. In addition to traditional military hardware, Iran has increasingly leaned into drone warfare as a method of monitoring and, if necessary, striking at foreign vessels in and around the strait. The IRGC's drone fleet includes the Shahed 129 and Mohajer 6, capable of both surveillance and precision strike missions. In April 2022, for example, Iranian drones were reported shadowing US naval vessels in the Persian Gulf. The cumulative effect of Iran's geographic control, military installations, and asymmetric capabilities creates a layered defense network that is difficult for adversaries to counter without significant risk. While the US Fifth Fleet, based in Bahrain, regularly patrols the waters to ensure freedom of navigation, it remains well aware of the dangers posed by Iran's minefields, fast attack craft, and missile launchers. Any attempt to forcibly neutralize Iran's position in the strait would likely result in a sharp escalation and potentially catastrophic disruption to global oil supplies. A potential closure of the strait actually came up recently as well. Thankfully, Iran decided against it following a ceasefire with Israel and the United States. The 12-day war with Israel struck Iran on the night of June 13, 2025, with around 200 fighter bombers in what it coined as Operation Rising Lion. Key sites struck included the Natanz uranium enrichment facility, the underground Fordow plant near Qom, centrifuge production in Isfahan, missile factories in western Iran, and command and control centers in Tehran. Among the casualties were high-ranking Iranian military figures. Israeli sources claimed both IRGC Chief Major General Hossein Salami and Armed Forces Chief of Staff Major General Mohammad Bagheri were killed, though Iranian media later acknowledged hundreds of fatalities, including senior nuclear scientists such as Feridun Abbasi and Mohammad Mehdi Tehranchi. Iran responded within hours, activating Operation True Promise 3 by launching a combined barrage of ballistic missiles and drones at Israeli territory. Over the next 4 days, Iran fired more than 370 ballistic missiles and deployed hundreds of drones, with major salvos on June 15th and 16th targeting central Israel locations including Tel Aviv, Haifa, Bat Yam, Petah Tikva, and the Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. According to the government press office in Israel, at least 30 ballistic missiles struck the country in the first 4 days, ultimately inflicting 28 fatalities and around 600 injuries, though nearly 90% of missiles and virtually all drones were intercepted by Israel's multi-tiered systems: the Arrow, David's Sling, Iron Dome, and US-supplied THAAD. Satellite imagery and open-source intel revealed precise strikes on high-value civilian and industrial targets. On June 15th, Iranian missile impacts at the Bazan oil refinery in Haifa caused pipeline damage and refinery shutdowns, resulting in 3 fatalities. Residual effects from missiles also shut down the Haifa power plant and temporarily closed Israel's northern rail station. In central Israel, a missile strike on Petah Tikva killed 2 people in a safe room-equipped apartment building. Despite suffering serious damage at the hands of Israel, which commanded the skies over Tehran and other major cities, Iran was able to bring the war into Israel, something that the locals were unaccustomed to ever since 1973. IRGC spokespeople claimed that long-range and ultra-heavy missiles accurately hit Israeli military installations, supply depots, and strategic centers, while drone waves served as distractions to overwhelm air defense systems. Notably, by June 21st, Iran had conducted its 17th missile wave. Israel's counter-campaign continued through June 20th and 21, with airstrikes hitting the Isfahan Nuclear Technology and Research Center, missile and drone factories in Shiraz and Khuzestan, and Iranian surface-to-air missile batteries. However, the IAEA confirmed no radiological release from these sites. Israeli authorities claimed multiple IRGC commanders were killed and that its campaign degraded Iran's nuclear and missile capabilities. A fragile ceasefire was brokered between the two by the United States after it too bombed Iran on June the 25th. Estimates suggest that during this 12-day war, Iran launched 500 to 550 missiles and over 1,000 drones at Israel. This was also the first time Iran struck Israel directly with sustained heavy precision weaponry, bringing the conflict decisively into Israeli airspace and urban centers. Previously, missile exchanges had been limited in scale or proxy-led, but this confrontation represented a sharp escalation. US officials described the situation as a recalibration of regional military influence, demonstrating Iran's newfound operational reach, even as Israel retained defensive superiority. Analysts caution, however, that although Iran demonstrated capacity for strike depth, its arsenal was significantly degraded, and Israel's ability to strike deep within Iran reveals persistent vulnerabilities. But what if Iran felt genuinely threatened? Well, they threatened to choke the Strait of Hormuz even now. Thankfully, it never came to that. But Iran knows just how strong a deterrent this is. Hormuz as a deterrent against military invasion or full-scale war. If Iran can't export oil, no one can. This is the central plank of Iran's defense doctrine, particularly since the 2018 reimposition of US sanctions triggered a sharp drop in its exports. A blockade or minefield in Hormuz would swiftly send shockwaves through the oil market. Analysts from Citigroup and JP Morgan estimated that a full shutdown might drive Brent crude prices to between $90 and $150 per barrel within days. Insurance premiums for tanker traffic would also skyrocket. During the June 2019 Gulf of Oman mining incidents, war risk insurance surged from approximately $50,000 to $185,000 per transit. During the recent Iran-Israel conflict, Iranian drones and missiles buzzed US and allied naval vessels in the Strait, actions intended to project power without triggering full naval conflict. This strategy places enormous pressure on global powers with deep energy ties to the region. China imports over 40% of its oil from Gulf producers and remains Iran's top client. India, Japan, South Korea, the EU, and the US are similarly exposed. Japan and South Korea have already deployed warships in the Gulf during past crises, while the EU and US have strongly condemned any threats to maritime stability. India, meanwhile, operates closely with its navy in the Arabian Sea, particularly around strategic choke points like Bab el-Mandeb, to hedge its energy security. Hormuz also plays a pivotal role in Iran's psychological and strategic messaging. Leaders, including Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and senior IRGC commanders, routinely cite the Strait as a non-negotiable red line, cautioning Gulf neighbors like the UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia against permitting their territory to be used in strikes on Iran. Such warnings serve as both deterrence and preemption. To Israel and the US, Hormuz thus embodies Tehran's forward defense approach, projecting deterrent power beyond its borders without resorting to nuclear escalation. Yet this lever carries serious risk. A full-blown closure would almost certainly trigger a massive military backlash, including direct intervention by the US Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain, and possibly NATO allies under constructs like Operation Sentinel, also known as the International Maritime Security Construct. That task force, comprising 8 to 12 nations including the UK, US, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, was established in 2019 precisely to deter and respond to threats posed by Iran against merchant shipping. Furthermore, US naval prowess, including carrier strike groups, P-8 surveillance aircraft, mine clearance ships, and unmanned aerial vessels, renders the Strait difficult to permanently control. Technological factors also shape the strategic landscape. Iran's anti-access area denial capabilities, based on ballistic missiles, anti-ship cruise missiles, sea mines, fast attack craft, submarines, and drones enable it to threaten passing vessels. But the US and its partners have upgraded mine countermeasure systems, unmanned surveillance tools, layered air defense platforms, and strike assets ready to neutralize threats. The risk of miscalculation remains high. A stray mine, an intercepted drone gone awry, or a maritime standoff could rapidly escalate, potentially drawing adversaries into open war. Speaking of all-out war, can Iran measure up to Israel without nuclear weapons? Hormuz versus the nuclear option. Complementary or substitute? Iranian policymakers and military strategists have fiercely debated whether the Strait of Hormuz should remain the centerpiece of their deterrence doctrine, or whether the country should pursue an overt nuclear capability. The IAEA and US intelligence assessments as of early 2025 reaffirm that Iran has the knowledge to build a bomb, yet has not pursued the actual weaponization activities required. This restraint is widely interpreted as evidence that Iran considers its non-nuclear capabilities, including control of Hormuz, as sufficiently credible to sustain deterrence. A comparative cost-benefit analysis underpins this strategic restraint. Acquiring nuclear weapons would almost certainly provoke sweeping international sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and possible preemptive strikes. In contrast, Iran's Hormuz-based deterrent is controllable, reversible, and deniable. Limited sea mining or drone harassment can impose economic pain without triggering an all-out war. Moreover, Tehran conceivably retains the option to reverse course if external pressures make nuclear transparency more palatable than perpetual threats. The June 2025 Iran-Israel war has prompted a strategic reassessment. Despite US and Israeli strikes on its nuclear facilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, resulting in enormous damage, according to IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi. The conflict confirmed that Iran could still project power via missile barrages and naval and droning operations, including threats to close Hormuz. In Parliament, hardliners now call for suspending IAEA watchdog cooperation and even NPT withdrawal, while simultaneously approving non-binding resolutions to close Hormuz if under attack. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.